Hi everybody, welcome to the dungeon. My name is Robin and today is Flameworking 102.28. Today I have a really fabulous pattern to share with you all. It's called the Dragon's Vine and it's a really fun dotting and masking technique. It's easy to follow and fairly easy to accomplish as well. And the color that I'm going to use today is a multi-dark by Reichenbach. Here it is. It looks nothing like this in the end. You see all these beautiful colors develop after you're finished using it. It is more powerful than the Iris Orange Raku glass. So I recommend that everybody pick some of this up if you haven't already. And if you don't flame work, I hope you enjoy. And as always, I hope you're all doing safe and well out there. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you all next time in the dungeon. All right, I'm going to start everything out by pulling some stringers, and I want to pull a stringer of my base color as well as the stringer for my pattern. So this is the multi-dark that I'm going to get a nice big wad of, and I'll go ahead and pull my stringer out here. I want a thick stringer. It's easier for me to work with a thicker stringer. But then again, I'm working on a large bead. So if you're making a small bead, you may want to pull a thinner stringer. Either way, this multicolor dark is so cool. You can already see the colors completely different from the rod itself. So we'll see how this turns out in the end. And yes, you also want to pull a nice stringer of your base color. And my base color is the uranium yellow. And the color is expensive and I don't have a lot of it left, but I thought it would make a beautiful contrast with the multicolor. So what I'm going to do is start out by making a clear bead first, and then I will overlay the uranium yellow on top of it so as not to waste too much of that color. Okay, so starting out, I'm just going to add some wraps onto my mandrel, and I want to make sure my mandrel is nice and hot before the glass is put on it. I don't want any kind of bubbles rising up, and gassing off from the mandrel if it's too cool. And once you have a nice long kind of barrel-shaped bead going here, I'm going to smooth everything out. I want my edges and everything to look good before I continue. And when I'm happy with that, I'll go ahead and start another wrap. And I am using the 8 to 9 millimeter Effetri Super Clear. It's my favorite clear, but you'll use whatever clear you have on hand or whichever one is your favorite. And I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this bead with another layer. And, I just like using the thicker rod because I get more glass on this bead than, say, a 4 or 5 millimeter rod. And once I have that on there, I'll go ahead and just start to heat everything up and smooth it down until I have the shape that I'm looking for, which is just a simple barrel-shaped bead. Now, if my glass is super hot, then I will usually only roll in one direction. And as it cools down and stiffens up a little bit, then I feel more comfortable rolling back and forth. Okay, so now for our uranium yellow. And I'm going to start my overlay by just wrapping the very end. And I'm as close as I can get to the mandrel without touching it. And then I'll just start to overlap slightly as I go into this long spiral as I kind of wrap this color onto the base bead. And you want to make sure that if you do this technique, there is no clear in between. So you want to make sure that you are definitely overlapping the color a little bit as you go. And of course, my rod got a little short, so I'm just using a tweezers to help me finish wrapping this up. And once I have that on there, I like to kind of pull the color of the edges as close as I can to the center of the mandrel. I always do that first, and then I will continue shaping. And the one thing I notice about doing this overlay is that the clear glass is a little stiffer than the color glass. So it kind of is an advantage because you can really heat this bead up a lot, but it will, kind of the center of it will stay stiffer for you. So it's a little easier to work on, and I'm not too worried about overheating the bead because the clear will help it to hold that shape. So really all I'm doing is just kind of smoothing and melting the color on top until I'm happy with it. And then we'll go ahead and start our pattern. Okay, so I have our multi-dark stringer here, and I'm going to start out by making a really big S curve around this whole bead. So I'll start on one side and do my little curly Q and bring it over and up to the other side, and then do the rest of the curl in the opposite direction. And I want a nice big S curve over this whole bead. And you see that where the S begins and ends, it's kind of close to each other right there. And that's really my basic pattern here. So once I have that on there, I could flatten this down by heating and using a knife or something. But for me, it's a lot easier to just very quickly heat and roll it meticulously, roll it exactly where I need to roll it on the little marvering pad there until everything is nice and smooth. I just find that heating and rolling it is a little quicker and easier for me to do. So once we have all of that cane nice and flat, I just added this dot there for some reason. I didn't add any more, but we'll just finish that later on. So to finish our pattern, we are going to use the stringer of our base color. In this instance, it is the uranium yellow. And I'm going to start by adding very small dots around one side of the line. And I am adding it starting in the center, because that's where I don't want to go over a dot. I want to start in the center and work my way around the edges, and I am adding a dot halfway on that edge. And I'm working on my right side. So I will turn this bead around to finish it, but I always want to do the right side first because it's easiest for me to reach. I don't want to reach over the bead and try to put dots on the other side. It's just easier for me that way. So you'll put the dots on in whatever way you wish. But I'm just going to finish up on this side and then give it a slight heat. Every time, I'll add a couple dots and then I'll heat it, add a couple dots, heat it up again. I don't want any of these dots to fall off while I'm working on this. And then I'll turn the whole bead around and finish the dots that are closest to me. So I hope you understand what I mean by adding these dots on the right side. I always like to give it a light kind of flash in the heat after, 4 or 5 or 6 dots, and then I'll just continue. All right, so that is that for the dots. And what I want to do now is I will add that extra dot on the other side. Just, those are just going to be just patterns around the rest of the bead. I'm having a hard time with my words today, you guys. Forgive me. Okay, so after I flatten those little elements down, I want to go ahead and heat everything up nice and evenly. I don't want to heat up one side more than the other because I'm looking for all the dots to melt down at the same rate. So I'm heating from one side and gently working that heat to the other side and going back and forth so everything appears to melt down simultaneously. All right, then I'll give it just a very gentle smooth on the marvering table here, or my little marvering pad. And I'll go ahead and just get back into my shape again. I want everything nice and smooth. And once it starts to develop again, of course, the uranium yellow looks transparent when it's really hot. So once it cools down, you'll be able to see the dots really well. So from here, let it cool down some more, and now you see how beautiful those dots have melted in and masked the stringer. Okay, so to kind of finish up this pattern, it's super easy. You're just adding very small dots on top of each one of those little peaks that we just made. And I'm going to do it the same way. I'll start from kind of the center of the bead and work my way to the outside. And I'll add several dots, and then I'll give the whole thing a nice heat to keep it warm and happy the whole time I'm working on it. And what I love about this glass is that you can constantly see the colors shifting and changing every time you heat. This bead probably took about 30 to 45 minutes to make. It just kind of depends on the size of your bead, how much patterning you want to add, but this specific pattern, it takes time to finish. And once I'm done adding the dots on one side, and I am adding dots for patterning as well around the bead, I'll go ahead and flip everything around and finish my pattern on the other side. And of course, don't forget to add a few dots, heat everything up, keep the bead nice and warm while you're doing this. Okay, so those are all the dots that we need, and now I'm just going to finish up my little pattern around everything. And for the pattern around this dragon's vine, it can really be anything you want. I just thought it would be fun to add some dots here and there. And after I add my dots, I'll go ahead and flatten them down so I can add another layer of dots. And again, I'm just going to use my the uranium yellow. Those are the only colors I'm going to use in this whole bead. So I'm just going to add a few more dots here and there. Flatten them down. And then a couple dots of the uranium yellow on top. And when you're making a bead like this, you're just adding the pattern where you feel like there needs to be something there, and really it's all about what makes you happy while you work. And everything else is pretty much just making sure I like what I see, and we're just going to add some little tiny micro dots on top of those dots just to give it a little bit more interest, keep the eye moving around the bead, and we are just about finished. All right, I am going to end everything with these two teeny tiny micro dots here. And then I thought that maybe if I gave it a, like if I reduce my flame, I just thought maybe that would help the color change a little bit. So after I kind of soak the whole bead in a nice warm flame, I will go ahead and give it a quick fire polish and see what happens. I honestly don't know if you really need to fire polish. I honestly don't know if you need to reduce this or not. I don't think you have to. I think the colors will look fabulous either way. But here we have it, our Dragon's Vine bead, and I hope you all enjoy. We'll see you next time in the dungeon.